Sounds the same.
Okay. We're recording now. So welcome everybody to session number 6 of our study in Rediscovering Messiah Yeshua, looking at the Gospels from a Messianic Jewish perspective. And this one is entitled, "And I Say to You." So this is an important phrase, which we're going to delve into to some degree, because it's a mark of controversy about Yeshua's relationship to Torah. So, excuse me 1 second while I get something here. I forgot mine, as usual.
I can't remember everything.
So, let's take a look at this. I want to look at the phrase in the Gospel of Matthew before we comment a little bit on it. And of course, some of this material is covered in the notes that I sent to you. Okay. So let's pick it up right at chapter 5, verse 21. I want to just look at this one verse, not for the content of Yeshua's teaching here, but some of the language. Okay? So it says, "You have heard that the ancients were told, 'You shall not commit murder, and whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court.' But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court," and so on. So they translate this phrase in there, in this Greek, "But I say to you," and I want to look this up for you in the Greek for a moment. Okay. Where's the phrase? So the phrase in Greek is ego delego haimi, which means "but I say to you." At least that's the way it's often translated. Okay? Ego delego haimi. All right? That's the way it's been translated traditionally for many, many years, and yet makes very little sense in terms of context in the storyline. So let's see how that's true. How could everybody be wrong and all of a sudden, somebody else is right? That kind of thing. So the first question I ask in our notes is, was Yeshua trying to overturn the Torah by his teaching from the Sermon on the Mount? Now, who can show me a scripture which would disprove the fact that Yeshua was trying to overturn the Torah? We looked at it last week. It's found right here in the Sermon on the Mount. So this is to test your memory a little bit. Anybody know the verse I'm thinking about? Well, why don't you look it up? It's chapter 5, verse 17. And you can read that for us with a loud, clear voice.
I think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass away from the law until all is accomplished.
Okay.
That's the one I was going to say.
All right.
I forgot we read it.
Okay, so the point is that Messiah, now how could these sayings both be true at the same time, since they are quite opposite one another? On the one hand, he's abrogating the Torah, but on the other hand, he's saying quite explicitly, "I'm not doing that."
When I got your email, I didn't understand the question. Why these words abrogate the Torah? Like, why are we
Okay,
thinking that
very
that's
good
what
question.
he's even saying?
So it's a good question. So when you use the word but, okay, when you say a word is but means in opposition to. This, it's like, hey, you look beautiful today, but
Hey, I don't want to hear the
but, and then I'm going to, then I'm overturn what I just told you about yourself. You know what I mean? It's sort of like that, right?
Right.
That's the word. That's the function of but in normal English sentence. Sort of qualified. It's a qualification, right?
Does he say about that? Or does he say it?
Well, according to lots of translators, this phrase "ego de lego heinen" means, "But I say to you," but I say to you. But there's another way to translate.
I say "and." When I look, I say "and."
If you go back to his time, would he have even used the word "but"?
No, he would have spoken.
Is there such a word?
He
in
would have
Hebrew?
spoken the word in Aramaic or in Hebrew.
Right.
And there's a different phrase. I'm going to find that phrase for you. I think I wrote it down, actually. Did I write it for you here? I may not have written it down in Hebrew. Let me find the phrase in Hebrew. Because here's the thing. Yeah, here's that same phrase, as it is often used in Jewish discussions about Torah. So you have one rabbi speaking, and then another rabbi speaking about the same subject, and they would say it would be written this way if you were to follow it in the Mishnah, for instance, one of the books of law. It would say, "Va'ani omer lachem," basically saying, "And I say to you."
And
Because the word vav, the vav in Hebrew, the letter vav in Hebrew is this connecting word, which can mean a number of different things. But there's a hermeneutic principle that you find in rabbinic discussion, and probably was true in Yeshua's day as well, because these things come from a deep ancient root, that you don't negate the saying of the other rabbi. If you have some other opinion, you add to it.
I love that. That's so cool.
Because who says you're right? Okay, so you see this in Gemara, which is a portion of the Talmud, where you have a Mishnah where ancient rabbis made a proclamation about something, and I'm going to show you one, and hopefully we're going to look at it together and show you how this mechanism works. And then and in the Gemara, all they're ever doing is they're weaving together all the different opinions to bring cohesion, ultimately to bring cohesion to the whole thing. So I want you to consider this quotation from the Mishnah that I put down for you. And in case you're not aware, the Mishnah is the first major written redaction of the oral tradition, sometimes called the Oral Torah. It's also the first major work of rabbinic Judaism. That it was prior to this time. It was written in 200 CE, and prior to that time, the tradition was oral in nature, meaning that people passed it down to their students orally, and they memorized it, and so on. But by the time of the year 200, things had gotten so difficult for the Jewish people that they were afraid that these things were going to be lost unless they were recorded. And so a number of very prominent rabbis, Rabbi Meir, Judah Hanassi, the prince, these were some famous people, compiled the sayings of the rabbis from the ancient times, from the Tanaim. The Tanaim were these ancient rabbis, sages from like 200 BCE until 200, compiled their writings into their sayings into writing, and put it into categories and organized it into volumes. Very cool. And so it became the permanent writing. The rabbis after them would comment on what was written down, because once you write it down, then it becomes canonized, And then you're not going to change that. What you're going to do is you're going to comment on it. Like today, nobody thinks they're going to write another book of the Bible, unless they're nuts. But what lots and lots and lots of people do, including myself, we write commentary on the Bible. What does it mean? What was the apostle saying when he said this? What was the Yeshua saying when he said that? So people do that. Okay. So, and what you will find in those things, very interestingly, is they don't negate previous ones. That's not how they do it. They add it on, and then you have to bring it all together. And I'm going to show you how that works in one Mishnah. You're going to get to take a look at one Mishnah, and we're going to see how that actually worked out. And then, then we can talk about what Yeshua is doing in his teaching. Okay. So it says in Perkei Avot, every controversy that is in the name of heaven, the end thereof is destined to result in something permanent. But one that is not in the name of heaven, the end thereof is not destined to result in something permanent. So what's the argument there? What are they actually saying? What are they saying? If it was for the sake of heaven, in other words, when there's an argument, a disagreement between two sages over an issue of Torah, let's say, if the intent, if the heart of the matter, on the part of both parties, is for God's sake, because they really have good intentions, then that is destined to be something to result in something permanent. That something is going to be resolved out of all of that. But if it's not, because somebody has an ulterior motive, all they want to do is destroy the reputation of another, let's say, or something to that effect, that will be for naught. That will not last. Okay, so this is why when we're critical of things, we have to be sure that we're doing it for the sake of heaven. You know what I mean? We don't just speak against something just because we don't like something. We already don't like a guy or whatever. So then they go on and give an example. Which is the kind of controversy that is in the name of heaven? Such was the controversy between Hillel and Shammai. And which is the kind of controversy that is not in the name of heaven? Such was the controversy of Korah and his congregation. So remember, here's a comparison, right? Hillel and Shammai had different approaches to what was righteous in Torah. And they had many, many, many disputes. By the way, in the Talmud, Hillel and Shammai have 300 disputes. 300. Hillel won 299, according to the sages. But their arguments were for the sake of heaven. So Shammai's are there recorded for us, so we know what the whole thing is. On the other hand, what happened in the Korach rebellion? We just did this a week or so ago, right? In Korach's rebellion, was Korach doing that for the sake of heaven or for the sake of his own advancement?
His own advancement.
So that's the difference. So when we look at the arguments between Messiah Yeshua and the Pharisees as we go along, and Yeshua's opinions on Torah and this and that and the other thing, we're going to have to use discernment as to whether or not the arguments are for the sake of heaven or for the sake of, or not for the sake of heaven. Okay? All right. So, I did put it down wrong here. So let's just I want to quickly take a look at a particular Mishnah in which this principle is applied. one of the simpler ones for the sake of all of us normal people. And I'll share the screen with our folks out there in TV land. Give me a second here. I'm not sure you're going to be able to see this because I don't think I can make it any larger, but hopefully you guys can see a little bit of it. I'm going to read it anyway. I got to get you out of the way though. So I can read it. Okay, so here's the Mishnah. Now, this is the Mishnah commenting on when we're supposed to say the evening Shema. Okay, because the Shema says, God says in the Shema, you shall do this when you lie down and when you rise up. So we're supposed to say the Shema in the morning and in the evening. So the rabbis are discussing when are they supposed to say it. I'm sorry about the print. When are they supposed to say it in the evening? What does God mean by the evening? Okay, so it says, from what time may one recite the Shema in the evening? That's the question. So from the time that the priests enter their houses in order to eat their terumah until the end of the first watch. So this is about 7 or 8, 6 or 7 in the evening. When the terumah is the evening offering. So the evening offering is made, and then the priests eat a portion of it together. Okay, so they're basically saying until the time when they have that meal. Then they should say that. Then they should say it. And then we have a second comment which starts here says until the end of the first watch. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, I guess that's actually part of the first rule. So from the time that the priests enter their houses in order to eat their terumah until the end of the first watch. That's when you say the Shema. Those are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay? So that's, like I said, it's about 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, something like that. I'm not sure about the precise time. Okay, so then it says the sages say until midnight. See that? So it doesn't say, no, he's wrong. The sages say until midnight. It just says the sages say until midnight. Now, in Mishnaic parlance, if you know anything about Mishnaic parlance, you know that when it says the sages say, that's the rule. Okay? So whenever you read a Mishnah and you read, and they might have 4 or 5 opinions, and then it says, and the sages say, that's the opinion in that. That's the opinion that goes. All right? Yeah.
I heard what you said before. You're supposed to say it when you lay down and when you get up. What does any of that have to do with laying down?
No, it just means in the morning and in the evening. That's how it's been interpreted.
The way I understand it means when you're ready to go to bed and lay down.
Yeah, okay,
you
right.
recite it.
Yeah,
If you're not going to lay down, you don't recite it.
Okay. Well, let's get the rule finished. Okay.
I'm not very sophisticated.
Yeah, no, but you're not wrong either, right? So here we go. So the sages say until midnight, right? So that means you could say it until midnight because you might go to bed a little bit later, and you say it when you go to bed. So the sages agree with you. Okay. All right. Now, it doesn't end there. There's this whole thing. There's a story that comes up afterwards. Okay. It starts off by saying, Rabban Gamaliel says, until the dawn comes up. Now, now, wait a minute. The sages already said what they said. So it's midnight, right? That's the end of the argument. Nothing to talk about, right? No, there's nothing to talk about. So Rabban Gamaliel said, until the dawn comes up. Why? And here comes the story. This is what I love about some of this stuff. It's just really wonderful. But it says once it happens that his sons came home late from a wedding feast. And they said to him, we've not yet recited the evening Shema. He said to them, if the dawn has not yet come up, you're still bound to recite it. And not in respect to this alone did they so decide, but wherever the sages say until midnight, the precept may be performed until the dawn comes up. And then there's something else there. That, the precept of burning the fat, and that can happen until dawn too, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but you see the story? He tells a story about how his sons wanted to say the Shema, but they were at a wedding, they couldn't get it done. So what does Rabbi Gamaliel? He stretches the rule. He says, okay, we can do it until the sun comes up. And guess what? That's okay. In other words, and I say to you, right? It doesn't say and I say to you in this case, but it says, but and I say to you until the sun comes up. Now here's the way the rule works in reality. You say the bedtime Shema up until midnight. Normally. That's the normal practice. And most of the time, you can do that because you're not going somewhere, you're not going out. But then, every so often, it may happen that you're out after midnight. So, it's okay to do it before dawn. Okay? So, it expanded the rule to allow the mitzvah to be performed. You see what the goal was? The goal was that the mitzvah should be performed. Okay?
What if you're a night watchman? You go to bed after the dawn comes up and you get up before the sun goes down. Does that mean you've got a problem?
Well, no, you may have to make some kind of an adjustment in your own routine in order to try to perform the mitzvah within some framework that'll work.
Couldn't you do it still when you lay down and when you get up, even though it's during the
Well, I suppose you could because you're going to say it twice a day. So whenever you say those things, Okay. So when you get up in the evening, you're going to do the evening Shema, and when you get up and when you go to bed in the morning, you're going to do the morning Shema. The Shema is it's essentially the
same. You got to put in writing that says as long as you do it twice a day, you're okay.
Basically. Okay. So there you guys have an example, of how this works, of this whole notion of "and I say to you." All right. Rather than but, which is a negation of what came before it. Instead, there's an expansion, okay? All right. So, Pinchas Lapid in his book, and remember this book, Pinchas Lapid on the Sermon on the Mount, he said this, he said, Yeshua furnishes us, thank God, not with antithesis, but with superthesis, which deepens, intensifies, and radicalizes the biblical commandment, guiding us back to their roots and original intention. That's what Messiah Yeshua is attempting to do for us. Va'ani omer lachem, and I say to you. Okay. Yaakov, can I ask you to shut the door to the sanctuary because they're going to be playing that music. It's blocked. Thanks. Okay. So now let's take a look at how this applies to Yeshua and his teaching and his use of this phrase, and I say to you, or however it's said in here. What was the Greek term again? Ego de lego aimi, which Yeshua probably never said because he probably did not speak Greek. Okay. All right. So let's go to the book and take a look at this first teaching regarding murder. Okay. So this starts in Matthew 5:21, and we'll see what's going on. Now, I want you to understand something about how Yeshua operates. This is the further thing I want you to know. One of the things it says in Pirkei Avot is that it was the sage's job in terms of the mitzvot to build a fence around the Torah. And building the fence around the Torah is not necessarily just piling on junk so that, to make life miserable for people. Sometimes what its goal is to help you, to assist the individual in not breaking the commandment. It's actually there because there are things in human nature which run contrary to the mitzvah, and we need help. For instance, thou shalt not covet. Now, how can we guard ourselves against that? Right? I mean, this is, who hasn't, wanted something that didn't belong to them at some point or another in their life. I mean, nobody's innocent of that crime. And yet, the Torah would try to help us to build a fence around that in order to help us to prevent us from getting too close to the breaking of the commandment. And that's very often what the goal was. It wasn't always to make life miserable and make it more difficult. And Yeshua, but I can tell you this: Yeshua builds fences around the Torah. He does this all the time, and we're going to see that right here in this particular example. Yeshua building a fence around the Torah because the crime is bad. Okay, so let's take a look at this. It says in Matthew 5:21 and following. It says, "You've heard that the ancients were told, you shall not commit murder. And whoever commits murder will be liable to the court.
It was.
And I say to you," not but, "and I say to you." So he's affirming this. Yeshua wouldn't say, what would but it's okay to kill bad guys? But it's okay to kill your enemies? But it's okay to kill whoever makes you angry? That would be but. So Yeshua is not disagreeing with the notion that murder is a crime that is punishable through the courts. That's Torah. If you're a murderer, you have to go before the Sanhedrin. You go before the court, and if you're found guilty of that crime, you die. That's the way it works. So Yeshua is not negating that. However, he does want to add to it. He wants to build a fence around the whole idea of murder. So he helps us to get at the root of murder. That's what's going on here, right? So he says, "And I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court." That's the same thing as if you murdered him. In other words, in Messiah's view, if you get angry with a brother, you should be going before the court. At least anger that's undealt with. Okay? "And whoever says to his brother, 'You good for nothing,' shall be guilty before the Supreme Court. And whoever says, 'You fool,' shall be guilty enough to go into fiery hell."
Can you define raka?
Yeah, I'm going to.
Empty hand.
Yeah, I'm going to give you an idea of what's going on there.
There's some other debates about that.
Yeah. No, I'm going to tell you what's actually happening here. Okay, well, at least from my point of view. Okay, so let's think about this. Yeshua gives 3 levels of crime. He's creating 3 levels there. He's trying to help us understand. The fence he's built around the Torah is don't even get angry with a brother. Now, who has not been angry? Who has never been angry with anybody in this room? Raise your hand if you've never been angry.
They're lying if they say they did.
Never. Okay. Yeah.
I've never been angry, but I lie a lot.
I have to remember that.
Yes, good.
Okay. All right. So the point is that everybody gets angry. The question becomes, in Messiah's understanding of this, is what happens with that anger? And he tells you what happens. Anger that is not dealt with If you don't deal with your anger, you're going to, it's going to become something. And if you don't do something with that, it's going to become yet something else. All right? So let's go through this. So murder is the worst of all sins. You know, when you commit murder, you deny the other person their very life. But more than that, it represents you kill their whole future. And you kill, who knows who you've killed if you kill someone. You don't even know who you killed because they'll never be. Okay? So it's for that reason it's the most serious of crimes. You can't give life, so do not be taking it away, right? But Yeshua wants to get at the very root of murder, which he sees as the end result of a process in the human heart that goes unchecked. That's his problem. Murder doesn't just happen. You know, I think the statistics are something like 90-95% of all people who are murdered by somebody they know. If you do not die in a war, and war is a different animal. But if we're talking about crime, you know, domestic crime, you know, in the normal course of events.
They call that crime of passion?
Generally, murder is a crime of passion, generally, because it takes a lot to kill somebody, okay? Unless you're a psychopath or, you know, sociopath, it takes a lot to kill somebody. And 95% or so of people who are murdered by someone they know, because you have to have a reason to kill somebody. And usually it builds up over time. It didn't start out that you were going to murder somebody. It ended up that you murdered somebody. I've been communicating with a guy in prison who's been in prison for the last 30 years, and he went to jail 30 years ago because he murdered his wife.
So anger
he's
is the
repented
root.
of the crime, but he may never get out of jail. You know, it's just the way it is. He understands that.
You think he got angry at him?
He talks
So
about
that's
it.
what
He wrote
that's
an
what it
article
is.
about the whole thing.
So anger is the root of
He wrote
murder.
it. Right. So, you know, he wrote, and it didn't happen overnight. It took years of their frustrating relationship, and they were both wrong at one point or another. But he let it go too far. And it cost, and he did the terrible thing for which he will pay for the rest of his life. No getting around it. But it did not. Murdering somebody does not happen overnight. It's a process, and Messiah Yeshua is aware of this process, and this is what he wants to build his fence around. He wants to build his fence around this mitzvah to guard against the process which creates the final crime. All right? So Yeshua begins the exposition by the use of a rabbinical tool of building a fence around the Torah. By the way, I give you that quote from Pirkei Avot. But they used to say, "Be patient in the administration of justice, rear many disciples, and make a fence around the Torah." This is the job of the state. Okay? So building this fence. So murder can only be prevented if we take the proper precautions with those things in our hearts, which, if left unchecked, ultimately lead to murder. That process begins with anger. So this is sometimes our natural reaction to things that people do to us. Everybody gets angry. In fact, in another portion of the scriptures, I think it's in Ephesians, Paul, the apostle, says, "Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger," right? Mm-hmm. So we've been angry, but dealing with that anger is imperative. So who's ever angry, you say to your brother, let's say you decide you're not going to deal with your anger. What do you think the next step is? Because it's summarized for us in this phrase. Whoever says to his brother, "You're good for nothing."
It's progressive.
Okay. So I don't know, is that where the rock was? Rock is the last one, right?
No, next.
No.
No,
Next
one.
one. So this is the one you were concerned with, right?
Mm.
Okay. So what's happened here between your anger and you're calling your brother a good for nothing?
You're devaluing this individual as a human being, basically,
Okay.
because you've got to reduce that person to nothing.
Right.
You make them, you take away their value, their as a having a right to be a person, a human,
right,
creation in His
This
image.
is what's going on. So the step in it is anger, followed by contempt.
You could also say
All right.
contempt is the
Now-
beginning of anger.
No, not necessarily. You get angry at people you love all the time. They do something you don't like, and you're short. You're feeling short. You didn't get enough sleep the night before, or whatever it could be. Or maybe it's just the drip of aggravating things that they do every once in a while, and and all of a sudden you blow up. And I've been married for 42 years. I get angry at my wife once in a while. That
You
happens.
do.
And but the next step is down is contempt. See, that's the meaning of raka. When you say raka to a person, you have thrown them, you have insulted them, and thrown contempt upon them. Right? And it's that whole notion that you mentioned, Deborah, of devaluation. Because in order for you to kill somebody, you have got to see them as something less than you. So now they're at the level of contempt. That's a really difficult thing. That's why Yeshua said that's liable to the Supreme Court. Okay? Because you have now you've taken a crime to another level, and you are going to destroy yourself or them, or both, without dealing with this now. And we're going to talk about, Yeshua talks about resolution. We're going to get into the resolution. However, if we're not careful, what happens next? What's the next step? He says, and whoever shall say, "You fool," is worthy of fiery hell. What has happened in this final step? What is the step just prior to you taking a bat to a person's head? Come on, it's summed up.
Losing all your morals. You lose all your morals completely.
No. Something irrational occurs.
That they don't deserve to live, basically.
Right. So that it's hate.
Yeah, it's hatred.
Hatred. Once you hate something, that thing you can no longer see that thing, that individual in rational ways. Hatred is an irrational spirit, frankly. It takes a lot to hate something. You gotta stir that up with everything in your body and your soul in order to say, I hate that thing. Okay, it's one thing to dislike, not approve, find distasteful, hate. Once you make the decision to hate, that thing no longer has the right to life in your mind. Now you're capable of anything. You see, look, the Jewish people have gone through this many, many times. We talked a few weeks ago about the anti-Semitism. So what do? You devalue them until they become the object of your hatred. They're your problem, the scapegoat thing, if you want to use that. They become the problem, and you can hate them legitimately. They become the objects of your hate, and then they're disposable. Then you can just throw them into the ovens, or you can throw them into into boxcars, and whatever, and treat them like they don't really have life, or a different species than you. All right, and this is what Messiah Yeshua is trying to avoid. So he's telling his disciples, anger is the problem. Murder is the result. So what you and I have to deal with is the anger issue in our lives. Now, how are we going to do that? This is the question. All right. So, getting back to my notes here, the progression then is anger leading to contempt, leading finally to hate, which allows someone to contemplate murder. But, however, we must see that this is the root of murder, and we cannot allow anger to dominate us. We can't allow the anger to dominate. As illustration of this, here's a rabbinical story equating the contempt we can feel, which leads us to angry words with someone, and murder itself. So it says here, this is from Baba Metzia, which is part of the Talmud. It says, Atana recited before Rabbi Nachman ben Isaac, he who publicly shames his neighbor is as though he shed blood. Whereupon he remarked to him, you say, well, because I have seen it, shaming. The ruddiness departing and paleness supervening. In other words, if you publicly shame a person, that person's countenance is taken from them. Now, you got to remember, you're talking about society, and the ancient Middle Eastern society, and probably in the modern Middle Eastern society, where honor and shame are values that cannot be, we don't understand it here in America. We don't know from honor and shame in this country. But there, if you were to shame somebody, you have destroyed them in a real sense, if you do it in a public context. So it's as though you shed blood. You kill that person's reputation. Yeah.
I've seen that in fellowships and
yeah, it can happen. It can happen in some communities for sure.
I can see that.
Yeah, it's just that generally speaking, in our culture, people don't care about shame, very much. You see how public figures, they don't care anything about it.
No.
And
big thing in the Islamic family.
it's very big. Well, it's very big in the. Listen, understand something about Jews, or at least the Jewish people of this age. They are not Western. This is an Eastern culture. This is a Middle Eastern, or what we would have called in the old days, Oriental culture. Not the Jews migrated to the West, and obviously over the years our culture has been affected by the West and the Enlightenment and all that other stuff. But generally speaking, the Jews of this period of time were Oriental in their thinking and their whole way of, their whole outlook. And honor and shame were major things. One of the reasons why the Romans crucified Yeshua in the way in which they did was to shame him.
Yeah, it says he despised the shame.
It wasn't just to get rid of him. They wanted to get rid of him. They had a million ways to do that. They wanted to humiliate and shame him because he was claiming to be the king of the Jews. So this is what we do to your kings. We shame them publicly. And an example. So anyway, rather than allowing our anger to result in the shame of another, we need to do everything we can to avoid it. And again, this is illustrated in another story that I gave you here. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Simeon, son of Yohai, it is better to let oneself fall into a fiery furnace than make a companion's face pale in front of many, which is their way of saying shaming another person. Okay? Where do we learn that? From Tamar. For it is written in Genesis, Tamar let herself be let out to be burned rather than publicly shame her father-in-law. What is more, she left it to him to confess his guilt himself. As she was let out, she sent word to her father-in-law. And that's the quote they're using from the Bible. She didn't say anything. She let him say it so that she would not be publicly shaming him. Okay? So we have to avoid that in terms of our anger. If we get angry with somebody, it's tough. Look, isn't it a terrible thing? You're at work. Your boss gets angry over something and chews you out in front of your coworkers. Gosh, how do you feel? You feel like this small.
Yeah.
And it probably didn't do anything for your productivity either. We all, we've all experienced that. Or maybe we were the ones who did it to somebody if we were the boss. I know I have to say. You do the wrong thing. Somebody, you wanted something done, it didn't get done the way you wanted, and you let loose on somebody. And I learned that lesson long ago. You cannot do. It's counterproductive for everybody concerned, including you. It destroys your reputation among your peers. Right? So you don't want to do that in a public way. So when we get angry with somebody, what's the way in which we are to deal with it? Right? Dealing with anger, with our anger in righteous ways is a priority with God. For if we do not, it could lead to serious and even fatal consequences. So how should we deal with it? We do have emotions, and we are going to get angry. So what should we do? So the Messiah teaches us how we're going to go about it. Okay? So let's take a look at this. We're going to find out, this goes back to Matthew 18, where Messiah is teaching his disciples about dealing with conflict resolution. So in Matthew 18, beginning in the 15th verse, the Messiah says, if your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. If he listens to you, you win your brother. So now let's say your brother sins against you. Sister sins against you. And you're angry about it. They did something, they gossiped about you or took something of yours or whatever. Okay? You're really angry about it. The objective is not to go show them up and make a bad situation worse. It's to go to that person one-on-one. One-on-one. So here's a little lesson. This is a sidebar lesson for all of you in relation to me particularly. As a rabbi of the congregation, sometimes I become the object of people's scorn. The last thing I want to know is for a third party to tell me about it. I don't care. If you know that somebody has something against me or thinks I'm doing something wrong or I said the wrong thing or they don't like what's going on with this or that or the other, here's what you have. You have a responsibility to do. You go tell them to tell me. My face. Whether they're scared of me or not, too bad. Because it will never be resolved to a third party at that point. The more people you get involved, the worse it gets. Lashon Hara kills 3 people. It kills the person who talked about, the person who slandered, it kills the person who did the talking, and it kills the person who heard it. So, listen, somebody has something to say, let them say it to the one to whom they need to say it. And hopefully, if they listen, you've won your brother or sister back and everything is good. You get angry with somebody, you need to go and talk to them about why you're angry. Sometimes we get angry for illegitimate reasons. If we do, somebody needs to be able to tell us that too. So when you get angry with somebody, deal with it as immediately as you possibly can, even if it's a little uncomfortable, because it's going to get a whole lot more uncomfortable later. Okay? He goes on to say, but if he does not listen to you, take 1 or 2 more with you, so that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every fact may be confirmed. So now, if that person, you go to a person, and you know of something that's wrong, and they just say to you, I don't care, too bad, I'm not doing anything about it. Then you have the right to go to what I would say are people of authority, let's say something happens in the context of the community. You know, when you're dealing with people on the outside, in the outside world, it's a little tougher. Okay? But with Messiah Yeshua is talking within the body now anyway. He's talking about his people. So inside, within his people, if something goes wrong and you have there's a dispute between two of you, then and you can't resolve it, that's when you bring me in, or you bring in, you know, an elder or something, and you say, hey, look, you know, we're having a problem resolving this problem. Can we sit down with one another and can we sit down with you and talk it over? And then I can help to mediate. As long as, you know, that only works, by the way, if people have respect for the mediator. You know what I mean? Both are willing to listen to the mediator. Because the mediator is going to presumably try to be fair about it, and he may have something for both of you to think about when it happens. Milton, you had your hand up? Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you when it says if he listens to you, that doesn't mean, is that implying that if he accepts the call, agrees to what his point is?
No.
You're just saying, as long as he listens to you, then you're all set.
No, I think what Messiah Yeshua there is suggesting is that if you have, you see what he says, if your brother sins, meaning he's done something wrong, and then you go to that person and you confront them with that, and they hear what you have to say and turn from it, then it's cool. If, on the other hand, he doesn't, then others may have to come in. Okay? But that sin could have been against you. He could have sinned against you. Why would you, maybe if you saw that, you saw your buddy and he was coming out of a hotel with the wrong person, I mean, maybe you want to go and talk to him and confront him about it. But maybe it's because he did something to you, directly to you. Because later on, Peter asked, how many times should I forgive my brother? So there, it sounds like it's like, he sinned against me, personally. All right? So in the second case, you bring others into the equation in the hope that resolution can be found. And it's only after that Messiah Yeshua says, listen, if they don't want to listen, then you tell it to the community. And if the community, and if he doesn't even want to do anything then, well, then forget it. You just put him away. I mean, he's just not part of the people. This is like in ancient Israel, it would have been said this way in the Torah. It would have said, such a person shall be cut off from his people. That's the death sentence, to be cut off. You're wandering around the desert and you get cut off, you're in a world of hurt, right? Okay. He goes on to say, truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall have been loosed in heaven. Now that's a controversial statement. Now, I've heard some recent teaching on that I'm not all that pleased with. Okay? So the whole notion of binding and loosing has to do with spiritual authority. This has to do with the halakhic authority, if you will. That when rulings are made by responsible people in God's kingdom, God honors that. Binding and loosing.
This is in context of the conflict?
It's in conflict, in context of conflict. All in order to avoid escalating things to murderous levels. You understand what I'm saying? It's about, don't let things get escalated to a murderous level where there's hatred.
Shut it
So
down.
it's so much conflict. Think about how many congregations split because the situations are unresolved, right? In other words, instead of that people, shut it off. It should stop, but why don't you shut it off, Marlene? That would be better.
I apologize for that.
It's okay, honey.
So you're saying the binding and loosing is about saying the authority, basically backing up the authority of whoever.
Right. Those who are in authority, rightfully in authority.
So it's basically saying follow those who are appointed as the overseers.
Yeah. Right. We have, because by the way, nobody gets away with anything. If you have an unrighteous leader, that leader will pay for it. He's got to be, he's accountable before the Lord. Right. So nobody's getting away with it. The point is not to allow issues that start out as anger to escalate into issues of hatred. Because when they get to that stage, it's a death sentence for whoever is involved. In the case earlier in Matthew in the teaching, murder stems from the fact that anger was undealt with. Here, it's essentially the same kind of thing, where an unresolved problem results in an escalation that results in horrible things.
Even if the crime is not literal murder, you can assassinate and kill a person's character, slander, right?
Yeah.
Which is libelous, which is to be sued for that even. I mean, that's where it comes from, really. It's not always that you kill the body, you kill the person's reputation. That's murder.
But in a lot of ways, there's the old story of the man who goes around telling horrible things about, another man all the time, and then realizes it's his fault. So he goes to the man to apologize to him, and he says to him, "Well, what can I do to make this right?" So the man says to him, "I want you to take this feather pillow, cut it open, and throw it into the four winds. Now, collect all those feathers and put them back." The answer is,
Can't do it.
sometimes you can't repair it. That's why you don't want it to get that far. You see, and Messiah Yeshua is trying to help us not to get that far, because you're right. Once it comes out, once it's in the air, it's very difficult to put away.
But getting back to the binding and loosing.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that you have to be robots of the leader, right?
No, I don't think it's addressing that issue.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what.
Look,
how
one says I follow Paul, I follow Apollo.
Yeah.
We
all follow Messiah.
But one may be a disciple of Paul or Apollo.
Yeah. No, look, I'll tell you how we use this, for instance, in the Halakhic Council. I'm part of the Rabbinical Council.
Yeah.
So now we're a Rabbinical Council. We got like 25 members of rabbis from all over the country. But we do not represent everybody in the country on halakhic matters. We happen to be doing pretty much the only body that's actually doing the hard work of doing it. But we know that our authority only goes so far. However, for the sake of our communities are bound, and collectively, are bound by the decisions that we make in terms of halakha. So, for instance, if we say that our kitchens are going to be dairy kitchens, right, instead of having a beet, milk, and non-kosher food and all this other stuff, guess what? That's the way it's going to be. That is bound. Now, if you bring something that you shouldn't bring, I'm going to ask you not to bring it anymore. I'm going to throw it away. What?
What if you say everyone in your own house has to keep kosher according to?
Well, we don't. We know we don't say that. We're not saying that. We recommend these certain things, and people can then do what they feel the Lord is calling them to. But we don't tell people exactly what to do. But we do within the communal structure. What happens inside these four walls is the responsibility of the Mara Da'atra, which is the title, spiritual leader. Somebody has to be in charge of the overall spiritual, atmosphere, and Otherwise, anything goes. Then you have chaos. And Paul spoke against that. If you read Corinthians, they were doing all kinds of wacky stuff. And he said, listen, everything has to be done in order. So there has to be an order. And that's, and here, Yeshua is talking. We got to remember something. There's a context to this, but Yeshua is talking to his disciples, his apostles. And he's giving them a certain measure of authority about binding and loosing. That when they do things, that these things will be honored in heaven. That God will honor their decisions, because presumably they have been selected and discipled by the Messiah and are trained appropriately. If, on the other hand, they go wrong, like Judas, we know what happened, right? So that's why I think I know binding and loosing is very, it's weird. It's used in weird ways. But precisely what we're binding and loosing is questionable. They fail to see context. He says again in verse 19, he says, again, I say to you that if two of you agree on earth about anything that I may ask, it shall be done for them by my Father who is in heaven. For where two or three are gathered in my name, there am I in their midst. Okay, so again, here Messiah Yeshua is telling them, but does this mean that any two people can do whatever they want to do and it's bound? No. That would be crazy. That would cause a craziness in the world that would be intolerable. Well, it can't mean that. It has to mean something else within the framework and the context of Yeshua's entire teaching, which is all about conflict resolution. The resolution of conflict is the context for all of his teaching in this case. That's what it's about. It's not about, okay, I'm going to bind the spirit of, whatever, money here, or whatever other stuff people want to do.
Well, they say that they bind Satan, but if they do, I want to know who keeps letting him out of jail, because I still deal with them.
Yeah,
But anyway.
yeah. I think if people again take things out of context, we have to always remember the context in which something occurs, because nothing can mean what it never meant. So let's try and understand the context to the best of our ability and apply it in that way. If the Messiah says something later on about how we deal with spirits and Satan and all that other stuff, then from that we can learn what we need to be able to do. Okay, so now he says in verse 21, it says, Peter came to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? See, he brings it all back. Wherever you started drifting when Yeshua talked about binding and loosing, Peter brings it right back to the context. He brings it right back to the context of conflict and how we resolve it. And he says, well, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Yeshua said, I did not say you 7 times, but 70 times 7. In other words, you just keep forgiving your brother. The objective here is to restore, is restoration. When we are angry, anger separates us from people. The anger causes a separation. What we want to do is bring things back together again. This is what Messiah Yeshua wants to happen, to bring everything back to its normal state, what should be its normal state of love and togetherness, unity. That's what these things, so this is the whole context of the conversation. The whole idea about anger, not ruling over us, but something we deal with and get rid of, so that we can resolve our problems and move on into the future. Okay? So now, with this Matthew 18 framework in mind about resolving conflict, keeping it people to a minimum. By the way, anyone who knows anything about conflict resolution, whether you're a believer or not, even in social services, knows that conflict resolution is best done with the minimum number of people involved. The more people you get involved, the more complicated the situation.
Everybody's got an opinion.
It just gets too weird. It goes up. The issues go up exponentially. They don't go up numerically, they go up exponentially. So you keep it to a minimum, and so on. Okay. With all of that framework in mind, we go back to Matthew chapter 5, back to Messiah Yeshua's teaching on murder. All right, so we're going to pick this up in verse 23. After he said, "It's fire, enough. You're guilty to go into fiery hell," right? And after that, he says, "Therefore." In other words, the therefore is therefore the fact that all I said before is prelude to what I'm going to tell you right now. Okay? So therefore, if you're presenting your offering at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go first, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and present your offering. This is what he's saying about how we deal with the issue of anger. If you're presenting an offering, you in your pious attitude think you're so right with God, you're going to present your offering as if your offering is more important than your relationship to your brother. And you remember that your brother has something against you. See, he sort of put the shoe on the other foot. In other words, if you're the sinner, you're the one who's causing the anger in your brother. And you're aware of it. Then you go and you just leave your offering there by the altar. Just leave it. And go and find your brother and be reconciled to him. Make up. Figure it out. Get the help you need if you need help to make it work. Whatever is necessary, do that first. Then you can come and make your offering. See, so how many of us, gosh, if I could heal one thing in the world, I would heal unforgiveness. I would heal unforgiveness in people. Because it is the greatest sin in the world right now, in my mind. And it is the cause of more suffering, more woundedness, more brokenness in the world than any other sin or the combination of any other sin that I can think of, short of war itself. And probably all war is about unforgiveness too. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's unforgiveness. Yeah.
I once read that what forgiveness does for the person who forgives, it opens the doors to the prison of their mind and lets out all the hate and pain and anger and mainly the pain and the hurt, so that it doesn't sit there and fester in your mind.
Absolutely. Right, because that festering develops into something hard and immovable at some point. And I'm telling you, most people are living with some measure of unforgiveness, and it's the thing that we need to be freed of the most. Mm-hmm. You free yourself from that thing. Go into past, whether it was your parents who did something wrong to you, or a brother or a sister, or a boss, or your kids, or who knows, what. Everybody has something. Everybody. I've never met a person who has not been, wounded in this life. Nobody. I've been at this for 30 years, and I have not yet met that person who is not carrying a wound. And the question is whether or not that wound overtakes them. And the freedom from the prison is to search that thing out and absolutely forgive. Let it go. Give it over to the Lord, and He will set you free. And then you don't have a problem. And here Messiah Yeshua is saying, listen, if you would think you have some kind of a problem with your brother or somebody, then go and reconcile and straighten that out. Then you come and present your offering. Then your offering will be pure. Then it will be efficacious. Then it will have some meaning. To make these offerings while we are all angry and bitter and holding a grudge, all of that negates the power of God's offering. Negates the power of God's love and forgiveness in our own life. Messiah Yeshua was very explicit about that.
I was just going to say, if we don't forgive our brother, it says he doesn't forgive us.
Yeah.
That's very serious.
That's serious.
I tell my kids this, my adult ones, because they, we all have these wounds. You have to. You can't tell me I'm not going to forgive my brother. They had a fight. You got to forgive your brother. You can't.
Absolutely.
What are you going to do?
I mean,
You're not going to speak to him for 5 years?
Yeshua says, you will not be forgiven. Not
Some people
this
haven't
age of the world.
spoken in 20
I mean,
years.
come on.
or more.
Right.
That's some serious stuff. And yet, so many people carry it around.
I also found forgiveness is a pride.
Yeah, right, because sometimes it takes humility. Sometimes listen, forgiveness does not require that the other person acknowledges it either. It's not about the other person. It's about what's going on with us.
Yeah.
Like here, he says, listen, if your brother sins, go out and show him his. I'm sorry, I'm looking the wrong way. If presenting your offering at the altar, you remember that your brother has something against you. Now, in this case, it's against you. Leave your offering before the altar and go and be reconciled. In other words, go in there and ask him for forgiveness.
That's hard.
Okay, now, listen. He may not forgive you. Here's the thing. Who says he's going to forgive? Maybe he's so angry he can't. That's his problem.
That's right.
Not yours. If I ask for forgiveness and you don't give it to me, I've done what I could.
Right.
But believe me, I've been through this. And I've asked for forgiveness from people, once, twice, 3 times. They don't forgive. I go like this. I did what I could do.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you want? What do you want from me now? I mean, I've done what I can do about this matter. Now it's up to you.
Also, the certain things we have to follow the law of Moses, because it's actually it's give you directions how to do the reconciliation. Because Moses clearly explained, if you damage somebody, you have to compensate the damage. If you stole money, for example,
right.
You have to give them back.
That's right.
So don't just ask, forgive me, I stole money from you. You have to return the money.
Right.
That's right.
Well, that's right. Absolutely. The Torah is very explicit about
Recompense?
compensation. That was the word. Compensation. Well, we have to make compensation because there are times when you have to just make it right, and that's all. That goes along with the forgiveness. That goes along with repentance. Part of the repentance for doing something wrong is making the situation as right as you can make it.
Right.
Yeah,
You can't always make it
again.
perfect right, but to the extent that you are able, you're responsible to do so. So here he says, "Be reconciled to your brother."
When you
Come
forgive
to the
somebody,
offering.
when you forgive somebody, it does absolutely nothing for the other person. It does everything for the forgiver.
Yeah. And hopefully it does something for the other if they accept it, they receive it.
Yeah. They
Right?
may not even know
If
about
they
it.
receive it, that's then mutual. And then there's mutual.
Someone forgives me, I feel thankful.
Yeah. Well, right. And you should. And you should feel if somebody forgives you, you should feel thankful because listen, if you did something wrong, it needs to be corrected. For your own sake, if not for theirs, So then he says, make friends quickly with your opponent at law while you're with him on the way, so that your opponent may not hand you over to the judge, and the judge, the officer, will be thrown into prison. So here he's saying, make friends, he's going further with this. You see, in the first case, this is the thing about Yeshua. He's always pushing the edge of your envelope. This is another principle that we need to know about the Messiah as we go through his teachings. He's going to push you to the edge of your envelope. He's not content with your being, like everybody else. He always wants to make us go further than we think we can go, because you are his people, empowered by his spirit. We can go further than other people. And if we are going to have the mark of the Messiah upon us, then we have to be able to go further.
Go the
So in the
extra
first case, you can see, okay, I have something against my brother. All right, let me make it right. But here he says, make friends with your enemy. Now wait a minute. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm the one who's being wrong here in this particular case. I'm going to make friends quickly with your opponent, your enemy. While you're with him on the way, so that your opponent may not hand you over. Well, how do you know I'm not going to hand him over? Why is Messiah Yeshua assuming we're in the wrong place here? Necessarily, that's not necessarily so, right? And yet he would have us make friends with our enemy and settle it.
Yeah.
Because listen, how much is it worth? Pursue. Yeah, he's asking us to go the further step of pursuing peace, even with our enemy.
Was sure does.
Yes, it sure does.
We would want that.
And
If
it's an expectation of us. Think about the world we live in, the litigious world we live in. If this were a principle upon which we operated, and people who had disputes could settle them without 150 lawyers getting involved, the courts getting tied up for everything, and blah 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 blah. That's not the way it works. You get a hangnail, call a lawyer.
And we're not supposed to sue the brethren either.
Yeah, Michael, you've been itching to say something
We,
about
as
that.
carriers of the Holy Spirit, do have spiritual authority against principality and spiritual authority. So, going back to binding, and we do have authority over the spiritual realm, because the Holy Spirit is greater than anything that is spiritual, that is not. So there is authority when you said, binding and loosing only is a very narrow context. We do have authority.
Well, but you can't get it from Matthew 18.
Well,
Okay, this is my look. Understand something about my way of studying the scripture. This is me. I try to teach everything in its context. We have spiritual authority, but that spiritual authority is not lent to us from Matthew 18.
Right.
Yeshua is talking about a narrower context of that of that application. In that text, if we want to talk about powers and principalities and things of that nature, we could talk about things that Paul says, for instance, in Ephesians, where he talks about our battle not being against power, about flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. And he gives us ways in which we can combat those things. That's where we learn where our spiritual authority comes from and how to apply it. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not arguing the point that we don't have the spiritual authority granted to us over evil things in this world. It's simply where do we get that authority from, and how do we apply it? This is a teaching about how we resolve conflicts within the body. The whole thing of Matthew 18 has nothing to do with the outside world. Nothing. It has everything to do with what happens in the body. That's why I limited the context.
right. So
Okay?
I didn't want to leave it that was all to be poo-pooed. And
I'm not. No. Nobody's poo-pooing. Nobody's poo-pooing it. But I said, when I made my statement about it, I said others misapply this particular scripture, and they do. I'll stand by that comment that people misapply this scripture. Now, again, that doesn't say everything I have to say about spiritual warfare, because spiritual warfare is another topic that is dealt with in other places in the scripture, and we can learn a lot from that. Okay? Okay, just being clear on that.
A different direction. In 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11, another scripture that's very commonly taken out of context is, lest Satan should take advantage over us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. And I hear that, be not ignorant of Satan's devices. I hear that all the time in sermons and stuff. And usually they're talking about warfare, some type of spiritual warfare, where we're going to get caught off guard by some attack, some spiritual attack. And this whole context of scripture is talking about offenses in the body. It has nothing to do with spiritual warfare or being attacked by the enemy. It has to do, Paul is using his apostolic authority to teach us about forgiving those that offend us. And the device that he's talking about is unforgiveness. That's Satan's device against us as the believer. It's not all these external attacks. That's not even what he's talking about. He's talking about, be not ignorant of Satan's devices in terms of us not walking in forgiveness with our brother.
Yeah. Again, it's context is always vital if we're going to understand, as well as we possibly can, what it is that God wants us to know, and how we can be most effective in the powers that God does give to us against evil things. And listen, there are a lot of enemies, but most of Paul's letters have to do, and most of Yeshua's teaching has to do with what's happening inside the people of God, not outside the people of God.
That's the first battle.
So because we got to win that. We got to win that one.
That's right.
Then we can win the battle against the evil, the principles, people, the powers of principality, which is a further fight that we have to win. How can I
war against the enemy when I can't forgive my brother? What authority do I even have to?
Well, that's right. So here in this last challenge in this segment, Yeshua is challenging us to go further than simply forgiving our brother. Listen, in another place he says, if you forgive your brother, what is that? Don't even the Gentiles do the same. Don't even the pagans do the same. But we have to be. He wants us to go further up and further in, to rely on him. In other words, in this conflict, in this last conflict, make friends quickly with your opponent in law, and so on and so forth. The objective there is for us to rely on the justice of God, to be our advocate, if we do what is right before him, he will assure our victory, one way or the other. Even if we don't, even if we have to settle the case or whatever the resolution is. Again, the idea is to resolve conflict, to keep anger from becoming something else, and leading to horrible crimes. Listen, how many feuds have there been over the years between groups of people who cannot resolve their issues one way or the other, and they're constantly going back and forth with the other, and whoever has the hegemony at the moment is the one who's beating up the other.
That's why there's so many churches.
Well, not only that, it's why there's been so much war in the world over the centuries.
Mm-hmm.
It's why there's so much hatred in the world even to this very day.
Yeah.
It's because people are unwilling to trust that the Lord has all of our best interests at heart, and if we'll rely on him, he'll take care of business for us. Listen, if you commit your resources, your financial resources to the Lord, he'll take care of you. He's not going to make you, you're not going to go destitute because you were faithful with a faithful steward of God. That's not going to happen. That is not going to happen. People are afraid of this, and they get stingy, and that's when they lose. That's when you lose. So that's just one simple case. If we can rely on the Lord, that he will care for us in a conflict. then, listen, I can forgive somebody for hurting me, or I can apologize. I can apologize, whether I think I'm right or wrong. I can apologize, knowing that, if I humble myself, the Lord will lift me up. So this is what we want to do. Okay. Next week, we're not going to have a class, ladies and gentlemen, because it's the second Shabbat of the month, and we have our afternoon service. I'll probably send you a note during the week to try to remind everybody. But we have our afternoon service, and so we still haven't figured out how to do the class. I may decide to do something new, different. But right now, that's the story. And actually, I just remembered something. The week after that, I'm going to be at the UMJC conference in Chicago. So that's 2 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Sorry about that.
I'll be in touch with everybody so we can pick this up. I'm sorry about the interruption, actually, because we're getting into the really good stuff right now. Thank you. I received that. Now
Oh, I
we're both
love
you. Yes, but our next time together, we're going to talk about marriage and divorce, according to Messiah Yeshua.
Should be a good subject.
That ought to be interesting. We're going to talk about marriage and divorce. We're going to talk about oaths, and we're talking about friends and enemies. And you'll see how they're all related, by the way. Okay, so let's have a word of prayer before we break up.
Okay.
So, Father, we just thank you for another good day, another great study. And, Lord, help us all with conflict resolution in our lives. Help us to forgive and to be forgiven, Lord. And maybe sometimes even to learn how to forgive ourselves. So, Father, I pray that these principles, these ideas that Messiah Yeshua is pushing us to, of loving our enemies and going further than we thought we could go, will be embedded in our hearts and empowered by your Holy Spirit. Bless us, we pray, and on this Shabbat and in all the days to come. In the name of Messiah Yeshua. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Shabbat Shalom, guys.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Touch.
Love my enemies.